Okay, Matthew 7. Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 through 4. It says, "Do not judge so that you won't be judged. For with the judgment you use, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and look, there's a log in your eye?" The second church that I served in, we had a man in the church who had always been something of an authority on everything. He was one of those guys who insisted on having the final word on any topic. Most of the time, you could take it with a grain of salt. But when it came to spiritual matters, it could be really annoying at times and probably even destructive. I would imagine this attitude and view has grown and gotten even worse with the technological advances and the development of social media. Now, you know the type of person that I'm talking about, right? Most days on their Facebook status, it has to do with something that somebody else is doing wrong. Either the president or this senator or that governor or this pastor or that preacher or this church or that denomination. If you want to know what everybody else is doing wrong, that's your go-to person. I remember one time he was complaining about a certain preacher that was on TV at the time, and he said that he wasn't sincere. And one of his friends said, "Who made you judge and jury? The Bible says, 'Judge not, lest you be judged.'" And naturally, he was very quick with a response. And he said, "The Bible says that we're to judge with a righteous judgment. It also says that by their fruits you shall know them. I'm not his final judge. I'm just a fruit inspector. And his fruit doesn't pass inspection." And the friend then responded with, "Again, who made you fruit inspector?" It was at that point that I left the room. Yeah. But on Facebook, those type of arguments can go on and on and on and on. And if you think I'm talking about you, you're wrong, because I know nothing about Facebook. I don't get on Facebook. The only reason I know what my wife posts on Facebook is when one of you says, "Hey, did you see," or makes a comment about something that she posts, and I'm going, I don't know what you're talking about, because I don't even look at her Facebook, because I don't do Facebook. So if what I said you think hits you, just you're guilty. That's all there is to it. But all of this actually kind of raises a point that I think we need to consider. Where is the proper middle ground between the statements that Jesus made about making judgments? In Matthew 7:1, he said, "Do not judge so that you won't be judged." In John 7:24, he said, "Stop judging by mere appearances and make a right judgment." Also elsewhere in the New Testament, both Jesus and Paul said that there are going to be times when we need to confront somebody about their behavior. So where's the balance? Well, tonight I hope to be challenging you a little bit to think about, at least, how you use or misuse approval in your relationships with others. When Jesus said, do not judge so that you won't be judged, he's talking about the human tendency to want to play God, to set ourselves up a little bit higher than everyone else, a little wiser than everyone else, a little more together than everyone else, maybe a little more righteous than everyone else. It's the attitude that says, I'm going to set the standard, and it's up to you to meet my satisfaction. There are people who use this kind of approval to manipulate and control those that are around them, not just in relation to spiritual matters, but in every area of life. And tonight I want to say, don't be that person. I heard about a woman who told a friend that it hurts her feelings that her daughter never invites her over to her house. So the friend asked the daughter why they didn't ever invite their mom over for a visit. And the daughter responded, I'd rather be tortured than have my mom visit my house because she sits there and judges me the whole time. She makes comments about things, the handprint on the wall, the piles of laundry, the dust on the bookshelf. And I know I'll never be the homemaker that she is, and she's never going to let me forget it. Disapproval is rooted in judgment. And so tonight I want to talk about how to make the right judgment in the way that you deal with others. I think there are 3 guidelines that we need to follow. First of all, if you're not on the jury, abstain from reaching a verdict. Today, there are a lot of people that believe that they have to have an opinion about everything, and they feel that they have to voice that as well. We live in a culture that has a hard time differentiating between being opinionated and being involved. There are a lot of people that think that if they just speak out against something, they've done their part. The problem is that many times we want to speak out about things that really aren't any of our business. I don't think it's my job, for example, to speculate about whether or not a certain pastor is sincere, not unless we work closely together. It's not my job to criticize the way another church does ministry, not unless I go to that church. And I would also say, not unless I'm fully connected in that church's ministry. It's not my job to pass judgment on everyone else. In the book of Romans, Paul said, who are you to criticize another's household slave? Before his own Lord, he stands or falls. That's in Romans 14. In the book of 1 Thessalonians, Paul said, but we encourage you, brothers, to do so even more, to seek to lead a quiet life, to mind your own business. The bottom line is, if you're not directly involved with a situation, you really don't need to have an opinion about it. And you certainly don't need to express it. If you're not on the jury, then you need to keep from making any kind of a verdict. That means that there are going to be times when you need to say to yourself, this is none of my business. I'm going to keep my nose out of it, and I'll keep my opinions to myself. And that brings us to the second guideline that I'd like to suggest. That is, before you evaluate anyone else, evaluate yourself. There's an old blues song by Bo Diddley that says, before you accuse me, take a look at yourself. It's pretty good advice. Growing up, my favorite part of the paper was the comics, obviously, being a child. And I loved the comic Peanuts. There's one strip in it in which Linus says to Lucy, why are you always so anxious to criticize me? And Lucy says, I just think I have a knack for seeing other people's faults. Linus said, well, what about your own faults? And Lucy shrugs and says, I have a knack for overlooking them. But the reality is, we're all pretty much that way, aren't we? We all have a tendency to point out faults in others while we ignore the same faults in ourselves. Paul said in Romans 2:21, you then who teach another, don't you teach yourself? You who preach, you must not steal. Do you steal? Jesus said it this way in Matthew 7, verse 3 that we looked at earlier. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye? When Bill Clinton was going through the Monica Lewinsky scandal, two of his most outraged and outspoken critics were Gary Condit and Newt Gingrich. In time, we learned that both men were involved in extracurricular activities of their own at the very same time that they were blasting Clinton. They were doing basically the exact same thing. When Jim Baker was caught up in the Jessica Hahn scandal, his most outspoken critic was Jimmy Swaggart. Later we learned that at the very same time that Swaggart was lambasting Jimmy Baker, he was involved in his own transgressions. Most people don't have the kind of chutzpah to go on national TV and condemn someone who got caught committing the same sin that they themselves were committing at that time. It's just that nobody knew about it. What these men did is the textbook definition of chutzpah. It really is. But we're not that bad, are we? Mostly because we don't go on TV. Maybe we are, it's just in a different way. Maybe we don't condemn people who make the same mistakes that we make. We just condemn people who make different kinds of mistakes. Bigger mistakes, at least as far as we're concerned. For example, I know people who can't control their temper. They yell and they scream at their neighbors and at their family members whenever things don't go the way that they think that they should. In their eyes, they're just being intense. I heard one guy say, I yell because I care. Yelling is okay in their opinion, but also in their opinion, if you're not punctual, it's because you have no integrity at all. In their mind, losing your temper is a little thing. Being late is a big thing. That's the way we often see the world. Your sin is always worse than my sin. That's why it's so difficult for me to be critical of others, other pastors, other churches, other people, because I know that while I'm pointing out their faults, their shortcomings, I end up having to overlook my own. And that's very difficult to do. So before you evaluate anyone else, evaluate yourself. Be willing to be as hard on yourself as you are on others. And here's the third thing that I think we need to do, the third guideline that we should probably follow. Don't criticize a problem or a person unless you're ready to be a part of the solution. Church members have a habit of criticizing areas in the church in which they're not involved. For example, people who have no connection to the children's ministry don't like the way the children's ministry is being done. So what do? Do they volunteer to help out, to make things better? Not typically. Typically, they just criticize. They just cast their disapproval in the direction of all who sacrifice their time and effort to do children's ministry. Because it's easier to criticize than it is to get involved. It's the same with your family, and it's the same with your friends. It's easy to criticize and complain. It's easy to cast judgment or disapproval when they don't measure up to your standards. The greater challenge is to encourage them and to inspire them and to work with them side by side to help them to develop better habits. I had a friend at another church who told me that her husband wasn't pleased with her weight, and he would let her know it from time to time. And then whenever she would go on a diet, he would often make the snide remark along the lines of, "Again? I wonder how long it's going to last this time." And then he wondered why she didn't really enjoy his company all the time. If this man had had any sense, he would have been cheering his wife on. He would have offered to walk with her in the evenings, to go with her to the gym, to eat the same low-calorie food that she needed to eat. Leonard's outside, isn't he? Leonard, I'm sure you can hear this if you're at the end of the building. No, you didn't. While we were cooking breakfast this morning, Leonard told me that Pat was going to go on keto again. And he said he had told her that he was going to eat what she was eating. I mean, that he would do that. He would go on keto with her, which I applauded him. But I don't do that. My wife is total keto. Good for her. I also don't complain. I've never complained about Dawn's weight. She doesn't complain about my hair. I don't complain about her weight. You know, she can do what she wants. You know, it doesn't bother me. But if I told Leonard, I said, if in our household was only Dawn and me, I said I would probably eat more keto. I'm not going full out keto. No. You know, you say that, but how's this for chasing rabbits, folks? Who knew we were going to be talking about keto tonight, okay? But, you know, they sell at the store keto bread. You look at it, it's got all kinds of carbs in it. It just doesn't have as many carbs as normal bread. But it's still, so you can't really say you either go keto or you don't. It depends on how you look at it. I can't give up my bread, folks. Anyway. And broccoli is, get pork skins. Yeah, you can do pork skins. Yeah. Okay, anyway. Let's come back. Maybe he shouldn't complain when he can't go out to eat pizza as much as what he wanted to. But it's just easier for a lot of folks to be the voice of disapproval than it is the voice of hope. The French novelist Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, how's that for a name? He wrote The Little Prince, which most of you are probably familiar with. He said this, "I have no right by anything I do or say to demean a human being in his own eyes. What matters is not what I think of him, it is what he thinks of himself. To undermine a man's self-respect is a sin." But that's what our disapproval does. And it's very easy to do. It comes naturally to most of us. And it destroys the potential in those around us. Disapproval is cheap. It's easy. Anybody can do it. It takes no talent. It takes no character. It takes no wisdom. Anybody can show disapproval. Don't be anybody. Demand more from yourself. Instead of putting people down, make it your job to lift them up. Because disapproval is toxic. It only damages your relationship with others, and it damages your relationship with God. Because it causes you to see yourself as a little bit better than everybody else. It causes you to focus on your own sins less than everyone else. And it causes you to stay uninvolved and distant from those around you. And I can say with certainty that no one in this world needs your disapproval. You're not helping anyone with your condemnation and your condescension. I can also say with certainty that everyone who God has placed in your life needs your encouragement. And if they're not where they need to be, spiritually or professionally or personally, then your challenge is to get them involved and help them to take the next steps that they need to in the right direction. Be the voice in their life that says, I'm not here to knock you down. I'm here to lift you up. I once heard a pastor who said, say what you have to say and then shut up. So that's what I'm going to do.